Something very interesting and intriguing has come our way in the past 12 hours. Now, this is an official report that has been published, so the figures are from the agency itself. The National Investigative Agency that investigates the most heinous and horrific types of organized crime, primarily terrorism and allied, has come out with a report card, and the report card is something very interesting. Let me take you through some statistics. Of the 625 people arrested as accused involved under NIA investigations, 94.7, so nearly all of them have faced convictions, which means that the investigation has been sound and a trial process through the NIA courts has convicted these people. Because we had a horrible record of not only messing up and having an attack or a crisis that occurred, now we are becoming proactive to do the arrest before something happens and then do a sufficient investigation with sufficient evidence that not this investigation goes on forever and the case goes on forever, but that the people get convicted before a court of law. So 95% conviction rate. They've attached assets worth 56 crore rupees in 2023. Now, these assets are important because these are the people who either make a livelihood of terrorism or use these assets to fund terrorism. Believe it or not, in one of the NIA reports, we discovered that these separatists operating in Kashmir were actually buying investment properties with laundered hawala money from Pakistan in places like Gurugram, and then they would profit from those investment properties and then put those profits. It was danda. Let me buy a flat and the value of the flat will go up, so when I sell it, I've actually made a profit and then I'll use that profit for terrorism. It's obscene. Now, within this entire conceptualization of this NIA report card, what they have mentioned is that 43 people have been identified as those who have been party to attacks on the Indian consulates and high commissions in UK, Canada, and in San Francisco in the US. These 43 people, remember, it was the National Investigative Agency that was brought in to investigate these matters, because let's face it, it wasn't like the Royal Canadian Mounted Police or the Metropolitan Police or Scotland Yard or Five Eyes Intelligence and whatnot, who are very deeply investigating some cases but choose not to investigate these cases. Well, clearly, these people have now been identified. Now, remember that there were two separate attacks on the Indian Embassy. One happened on March 19th. There was an attack on the consulate in San Francisco on the 2nd of July. We also have seen other incidences where our high commissioners, our consul generals, our ambassadors have been harassed, they've been heckled, they've been prevented from going about their duties. You remember, of course, the incident that happened when they tried to, they broke the window of and threw stones at the Indian High Commission in London. Then they, of course, tried to rip down the flag when they climbed up, which was countered. So now let me open up this conversation. Professor Madhav Nalapat joining us on the broadcast. Pathikrit is with us on the broadcast, and Major General Shashi Asthana is with us as well. Professor Nalapat, first of all, what do you make of this piece of report card of the NIA? It's a novel thing. I'm glad they've come out with this. It's good information to have. What do you make of it?
Well, I'd like to say, Rishabh, that the fact of the matter is that in the past era, the fact was that several very good cases of the NIA somehow mysteriously became, quote unquote, weak cases. A very strong case mysteriously became a weak case. And there was frankly no mystery behind why it was a weak case, because the expenditure of individuals in election campaigns and in various other things, it went up very, very high. It reached very high levels at the expense of national security. Today, that kind of leakage is not taking place. The NIA is not being stopped from genuinely investigating cases. Cases are not mysteriously becoming from very strong cases to very weak cases. Evidence is not being lost. Wrong evidence is not being collected. And this is the very, very important difference that is happening between the past era and the NIA of today, which, as you said, is very highly effective. This is extremely disturbing, Rishabh, because the fact of the matter is, whether it is Australia, whether it is Canada, whether it's the United States, whether it's the United Kingdom, these countries apparently do not believe that terrorist action against India is important at all. I mean, they're supposed to be friends and allies of our country. These eyes are completely shut where the question of terror, in India. And I think it's a disgrace. I think it's good that this information has been put out. It's good that you're doing this show, because someone in these countries needs to feel who's protecting this kind of terrorists, who is defending them. These people need to feel a sense of shame that they're doing this kind of thing. And I certainly hope that the public at large in these democracies will understand the kind of people who are being protected by elements in the governments of each of these countries. Countries that are supposed to be fighting terror, countries that are supposed to be standing side by side with India, a fellow democracy, and basically leaving India to terrorists.
Okay.
And I just like to end, Rishabh, by saying, let's not call them Khalistanis anymore. Khalistan is a very noble name. They have adopted that name as camouflage. These individuals are plain and simple terrorists, extremists,
Yeah.
and they should not be dignified.
Fair enough.
Any such
Fair
appellation.
enough. We'll keep that in mind.
Very noble appellation.
Let me just read out and put onto record on this broadcast what the NIA said. And I'm quoting: the attacks on the High Commissions of India in Ottawa and London, as well as of the Consulate General of India in San Francisco, USA, also remained the focus of the NIA actions offences against Indian interests abroad through the year, which witnessed more than 50 raids and searches as part of the agency's efforts to unravel the conspiracy behind the attack on Indian missions abroad. The attacks had involved criminal trespass, vandalism, damage to public property, and attempts to cause hurt to Indian officials and damage the consulate building through acts of arson. Remember, there was an attempt to firebomb literally the Indian Consulate in San Francisco. I'm going back to quoting. The NIA has used several innovative methods of investigation, including cloud sourcing of information, while investigating the larger conspiracy of attacks on Indian missions, which resulted in identification of 43 suspects. The NIA stepped up its investigation in these cases in recent months and examined more than 80 persons in India suspected to be part of the conspiracy of the attacks. Unquote. Now let me get General Asthana into this conversation. General Asthana, 43 people have been identified because the NIA investigations, all the raids they are talking about, are the people within India who are linked or have base points, touch points with the conspirators. The problem is that the majority of them who are actually conducting the attacks are sitting in London, San Francisco, and Ottawa. What do we do about them?
This is interesting. In fact, let's put it this way, that it's a very encouraging record of NIA and a very encouraging effort to find out these 43 terrorist stroke criminals, stroke, shall I say, separatists. Now, what these, the fact is that if NIA, while sitting in India or while operating in India, can find out all this information through various methods, there is no reason why the local police in UK or Canada or USA cannot find it out. Obviously, they have all this information. Now, there are two major issues why they do not get attention there. One issue is all these 3-4 countries, they do believe that perhaps this is a small set of vote bank and it may benefit them in, that's one part of it. The second most important thing is that they all believe that strategically speaking, India is rising, and for a rising India, they need to have some leverages. And the buzzword going around in some of these countries is China is a challenge today, India could be tomorrow. And therefore, retaining certain leverages in terms of troublemakers is part of their policy, apparently, because that's what the actions on ground suggest. And perhaps they do ignore some of the drawbacks of that, because obviously and we have to take certain actions to make sure that those drawbacks becomes imminent, like confiscating property. They all have done it already, and I think more is being done. Their dual citizenship should be scrapped. They should not be allowed to come here and let them make so-called Khalistan in Canada or wherever they want to.
Okay.
But not here.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to interview you with practicality, General Asthana. I'm coming straight back to you. Okay. So, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, the United States actually maintains and publishes a compendium of assaults and attacks on their diplomatic missions. These are available at the US government offices, at the Secretary of State offices. So there's a compendium of every single attack that has taken place on a US consulate, and you know some of them have been nasty ones that have taken place in places like Syria and Lebanon and others. There has been one single attack that has happened on an American consulate related building in India. Some of you might recall it. This was in 2002 in Kolkata. This was the Harkatul Jihad al-Islami. They had an armed attack on the American Cultural Center or the American Center in Kolkata. The casualties were 5 Indians, 4 police constable and 1 private Indian security guard were the casualties. There were no American casualties, but the American Cultural Center was attacked. The Indian investigation resulted in the identification of the accused, Salim and Zahid, 2 of them who were killed in an encounter with the Delhi police in Hazirabad in Jharkhand. Okay? On just a few days after the attack, literally 48 hours later, Aftab Ansari, also known as Farhan Malik, the prime suspect, was arrested in Dubai. On 9th February, he was deported to India with the possession of Pakistani travel documents. 2 years later, a special CBI court found Aftab Ansari and 6 others guilty for the attack and gave them a sentence under section 121 of the Indian Penal Code for waging war against the state of India. The others who were sentenced were Rehan Elam, Mushrat Hussain, Adil Hassan, Hasrat Alam and Shakir Akhtar. On February 5th, 2010, the Calcutta High Court upheld the death sentence but commuted the capital punishment so that it became life in term. Okay? So, a very serious attack takes place by the Harkatul al-Islami on the American Center in Kolkata. Within 24 hours, the main people are arrested. Within 72 hours, 2 of the attackers have been eliminated by the Delhi police in an encounter. Within the period of 2 or 3 years, a court judicial proceeding has convicted them, and a few years later, appeal has also been upheld. Action has been taken because something serious happened. Now, Patikrit, I again beg the same basic question. If any of the Canadian High Commission, the British High Commission, the American Embassy, if somebody had gone to the gate and thrown a Molotov cocktail, what would have been the expectations from the Delhi police, from the Ministry of Home Affairs in India? What would the Americans, the Canadians and the British be justifiably asking of us?
Rishabh, first of all, we would have considered any attack even on American and Canadian installations as an attack on India. And therefore, we would have done everything possible.
I repeat, sentenced to death under section 121 of the Indian Penal Code for waging war against India.
Yes.
For against India.
Yes. And that means that anything happening in the Indian soil, even if it's on an American consulate, will be considered, as you rightly mentioned, as waging war against India. That is the level of seriousness which we put on terrorism or any act of terrorism. And that is what the Prime Minister of India has been repeatedly stating in the United Nations General Assembly, that you must define terrorism. The distinction between good terrorist and bad terrorist must go. And unfortunately for the West, when it comes to suit them, they will consider anything as terrorism. If it is an attack on American, the whole world is expected to go in the war on terror. But when it comes to something like, questioning India's territorial integrity, or those who harm India's territorial integrity or want to question India's integrity, then it becomes a matter of human rights. Then it becomes an innocent plumber. Then it becomes an issue of freedom of expression. This is the double standard, Rishabh, which the global north has done for a long time. And unfortunately, what they don't realize today is that the world has changed and we are not going to take it anymore. I must reiterate, Rishabh, the crux of the problem is the United Nations, majorly funded by the West, has still not yet defined what terrorism stands for, and that is what Prime Minister has been mentioning time and again.
Okay.
So let me tell you.
Let me point out again once again. So this is a attack that has been masterminded in Pakistan by the Pakistanis to attack the Americans. Within 2 weeks, the mastermind, India has secured the person's deportation from Dubai. Within days, the case is resolved because something serious happened. Now, General Asthana, this is the level of seriousness. Now, on your screens, ladies and gentlemen, are the faces of the people from the videos they themselves shot who are happily attacking Indian consulates and high commissions. Their faces are right there. Forget NIA, we have identified them. Right here on NewsX. Here are the people, okay? Right there. Now, what is the reasonable action, General Asthana, should we be speaking from the authorities whom we expect to take these matters rather seriously?
Certainly, they should take this, they cannot take the excuse that we could not find out. Obviously, they haven't investigated because the faces are easily available, and if NIA can get them, why can't they get it? So, obviously, the reason is that they choose not to do it, or they want to sideline it. So, intention is very clear, and intention is again, as I said, creating leverages and not taking it that seriously in a manner that they still feel that they could be useful to them in some manner.
General Asthana, why are we being diplomatic? You are saying that good terror and bad terror still exists. And for certain authorities in the US, the UK and Canada, these are good terrorists.
Absolutely. There is no doubt about it, and that is the reason, because of this double standard, as was mentioned, that definition is not being arrived at. But then this is what they have been doing all over the world. The double standards of some of these countries, when it relates to the terrorism or terrorists of A country versus terrorists of B country, that has always been there and will continue to be. Because the way they treat Al Qaeda or ISIS, they don't treat JEM or LET in that manner, or maybe some other organizations. Sorry.
Okay, so here's a simple reality check. Okay, if when you want to do something because a crime is being committed on your soil, versus you deliberately and malafidely choose not to do something. On December 23rd, 2020, Harneek Singh, living in New Zealand, a radio host of Kiwi Radio, was attacked and stabbed 40 times. 40 times they stabbed him. It took 350 stitches and multiple surgeries to save his life. There was a 48-year-old mastermind behind the attack who was given 13 and a half years in jail and a scathing judgment by the New Zealand courts, who accused these attackers of religious fanaticism. That's what they called it. So when the police authorities wanted to, this is a human being who's been stabbed, okay? It's your own citizen who works for your own radio channel who's been stabbed. So you are doing justice to your own citizens by prosecuting the criminals when you want to do it. Then, Professor Nalapath, we have the unique case where 329 Canadians were blown up in an aircraft and the masterminds could never be convicted. I mean, what does that really tell us?
Don't forget the power of money. Don't forget the power of narcotics. Don't forget the power of the money at the control of the Chinese Communist Party. Don't forget these kinds of lobbies and how influential they are in all these countries. If you look at Britain, for example, some of the ministers in Britain visibly cringe when they come face to face with somebody from the PRC. They act in a cringing manner, almost like a servant to a master. And believe me, if the similar action were taken against any Chinese mission, these chaps would be jumping to attention like Jack in the Boxes. Why? Because of money, because of the fact that large corporates milk money, and that the Chinese make sure that they get a lot of money, and that money is then given to elements in the political spectrum among officials, etc. In Canada, what happened? What happened in the Kanishka case? It was deliberately sabotaged by the police themselves. The Canadian police deliberately sabotaged it. Why? Because of the long history of collusion, police collusion between these terrorists, and of course, the narco trade that they peddle. So unfortunately, Rishabh, the fact of the matter is that these governments, that unfortunately, it is a disgrace, frankly, to their own populations that this is going on. And for a long time, India was keeping silent. For a long time, India was not sharing information that it had in its government of India, that it had in its possession about these kind of activities.
Okay.
Even for the last 3 decades, I've been saying, share the information. Now that information is being shared, and now it's important to convey it to people
Okay.
in the United Kingdom, in Australia, in New Zealand, in Canada, the kind of people that their leaders are basically protecting, the kind of individuals they are, full facts about them, and let the people decide whether this kind of mollycoddling of terrorists is justified or not. Let the people decide.
if
Governments are completely failed. Let the people of these countries speak, and I'm sure they'll speak in a very different
So
tone.
here is what the New Zealand judge had to say when he was convicting these people. And 13 and a half years, ladies and gentlemen, is the longest possible prison sentence for attempted murder in New Zealand. The maximum sentence was thrown at these people. And this is what the judge says, quote, "It bears all the hallmarks of religious fanaticism, and a strong message of deterrence is necessary in this highly unusual case," unquote, while throwing the book at these people. Okay? And the people that blew up an aircraft in the worst possible terror attack until 9/11 in the history of the world, they all walked away. One of them is walking free in Canada as we speak. So Patikrit, the names are on our screens here on NewsX. Gurcharan Singh from the Dal Khalsa UK, based out of London. He is operating one of the rackets. Paramjeet Singh Pamma of the Khalistan Tiger Force, based out of London. Has a notorious rap sheet here in India of all sorts of infamous and nefarious things. Wadba Babbar of the Babbar Khalsa, who's based out of Pakistan. We know who these people are. We know where they live. We know that they are now being actively shielded and protected because for one case in the Interpol, Prague, arrest, Czechoslovakia, FBI director, that is happening. But what about all these people?
So let me tell you, Rishabh, what Indian government in the last few years has done. In 2019, the NIA Act was amended, and it was ensured that NIA can investigate any issues related to crime happening on Indians or India
Anywhere in the world.
as well.
Anywhere in the world, yes.
And what has happened in the last few years is that the synergy level between NIA, Enforcement Directorate, NCB, NTRO and IB has gone up manifold. Therefore, what is important, what we must understand is that the narco trail, the money laundering trail has been so proficiently, chalked out, investigated that once they go and give it to the other countries, it becomes very difficult for them then to counter it and refute it. They may not take any action, but they find it very difficult to refute. Now, NIA has got the mandate from Government of India, much like the Extraordinary Rendition Program of United States, that NIA will no more depend on other countries for giving them evidence, for doing the needful. NIA would go ahead and do the needful when it comes to investigation and perhaps certain other things which we may not be aware of. So what has India done in the last 5 years is that Indian government has shown the willpower and the backing that this synergized effort will be made to do the needful.
Okay.
The West is being told, please make sure that you cannot keep on continuing to presume that you will be the umpire,
I have
the
a simple
batsman.
question to end this telecast. Why have David Coleman, Headley and Thavur Rana not been extradited, deported to India to face trial for 2611? What is the reason? Is the reason because they were working for the US deep state at some point of time in their lives? Is that the reason? I don't know. Because they were guilty of wrecking one of the worst terror attacks on Indian soil in which Americans were targeted and were made casualties. It's a simple question. I'm sure Five Eyes Intelligence has figured out their role. In the similar vein, what are all these people doing on British soil, on Canadian soil, on US soil? What are they doing? If you keep doing good terrorists, bad terrorists, they will blow up planes and kill your own people, and then told you so is not going to be enough solace. Who made the comment, snakes in your backyard? I think it was a former US Secretary of State, not an Indian.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.